At some point, guidance stops working. Not because you failed, not because guidance is wrong, but because your mind has crossed a threshold most people never reach. If you've noticed that advice irritates you, motivation feels unnecessary, and confirmation feels pointless, this isn't confusion, it's evolution. Quantum physics calls this a self-directed system. Most people call it being lost. They sub-wrong. When guidance ends, manipulation ends. When seeking ends, clarity begins. And when confirmation disappears, freedom locks in. This video is not here to guide you. It's here to explain why you no longer need guidance at all. If this already feels obvious, you are exactly where you were supposed to be. There is a phase in every system where instructions become unnecessary. In quantum physics, once coherence is achieved, particles stop behaving randomly. They no longer require external signals to tell them what to do. They move as one field, one intelligence, one unified response. The human mind is no different. When your inner world is fragmented, guidance feels necessary. You look outward because inward clarity is unstable. You ask questions because your internal signal is weak. You consume teachings because you haven't yet synchronized with your own awareness. But coherence changes everything. When your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and identity align into a single frequency, guidance stops being helpful. In fact, it starts to feel irritating, heavy, distracting, almost insulting. This is not arrogance. This is integration. A coherent mind doesn't need answers because it already recognizes truth on contact. You don't analyze guidance anymore. You instantly know whether it resonates or not. There is no debate, no inner conflict, no anxiety. This is why confusion disappears suddenly, not gradually. Confusion collapses the moment coherence locks in. At this stage, guidance doesn't elevate you, it pulls you backward. Because guidance is designed for fragmented systems, not unified ones. When coherence begins, guidance ends. Seeking feels noble, but it hides a quiet assumption that what you need is somewhere outside of you. Quantum physics destroys this assumption. The observer is not separate from the outcome. The observer is part of the system. Observation itself alters reality. This means the one who seeks is already entangled with what is being sought. So why does seeking continue? Because separation still exists internally. A mind that seeks guidance believes it is incomplete. It believes truth must be downloaded, permission must be granted, and direction must be approved. This creates endless consumption, endless waiting, endless hesitation. The free mind exits this loop. At a certain point, you realize that seeking does not bring clarity. Clarity ends seeking. The moment you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is coherent with who I am now?" something radical happens. Decision-making becomes instant. Doubt evaporates. Mental noise disappears. You don't follow truth anymore. Truth aligns itself around your state. This is why guidance collapses naturally. Not through rebellion, but through recognition. You don't reject guidance. You simply outgrow the need for it. Seeking was never your destiny. Integration was. External validation is a survival mechanism, not a sign of intelligence. It exists to keep fragmented systems safe. When you don't trust your own signal, you borrow certainty from others. You look for approval, confirmation, or reassurance because your internal authority hasn't fully activated. But the quantum mind does not outsource authority. Once coherence stabilizes, validation becomes irrelevant, not because you don't care, but because caring would imply uncertainty. A free mind doesn't need to be told it is right. It feels alignment at a level deeper than thought. This is where many people get confused. They think awakening looks like confidence, dominance, or loud certainty. It doesn't. It looks like neutrality, calm, stillness, a quiet refusal to be pulled. You stop asking, is this correct? Is this allowed? Is this approved? And instead a single question remains, is this coherent with my current state of being? That question never lies. This is also why manipulation stops working on you. Trends, fear narratives, authority figures, and motivational pressure lose their grip. They rely on validation-seeking minds. When validation disappears, influence collapses. This is not rebellion. This is sovereignty. The free mind does not argue. It does not prove. It does not explain. It simply moves, and reality rearranges itself around that movement. Guidance operates in steps. Intuition does not. Guidance tells you where to go next. Intuition tells you where you already are. That is why intuition feels sudden, quiet, and impossible to explain. It does not arrive through reasoning. It arrives through recognition. Quantum physics reveals that information does not always travel linearly. At the quantum level, correlation appears instantly across distance. No delay, no sequence, no instruction manual. This is why intuition doesn't feel like learning. It feels like remembering. When guidance stops working for you, it is not a loss. It is a signal. It means your mind has shifted from linear processing to non-local awareness. You no longer need step-by-step direction because your internal signal has become dominant. You sense alignment before logic catches up. You feel truth before language forms. This is also why intuition cannot be outsourced. No teacher, system, or framework can replace it. Guidance can be copied. Intuition cannot. It is unique to your state of consciousness, your coherence, and your current level of integration. Many people panic when they reach this stage. They say things like, I don't know what to follow anymore. Nothing resonates the way it used to. I feel alone in my knowing. What they are experiencing is not confusion. It is independence. Guidance fails because it was never meant to operate at this depth. Intuition activates because it belongs here. This is the level where decisions stop being dramatic and start being obvious. You don't overthink. You don't hesitate. You simply move, and the path reveals itself after. That is intuition, and it only activates when guidance can no longer reach you. Most people expect awakening to feel intense, emotional, explosive, life-changing in a loud way. That expectation is false. True freedom does not feel like excitement. Excitement is a nervous system response to uncertainty. It spikes because something is unstable, something is unknown. Something needs to be chased. Freedom feels the opposite. It feels quiet. In quantum systems, the highest states of order are not noisy. They are still. Chaos exists where coherence is low. Silence appears where coherence is complete. The same principle applies to the mind. When your mind becomes free, the constant inner commentary shuts down. You no longer narrate your life. You no longer rehearse conversations. You no longer argue with imaginary versions of people. The noise fades. This is why many people misinterpret freedom as boredom. They mistake silence for emptiness. But silence is not absence. It is stability. It is a system at rest because nothing inside it is fighting. Freedom does not beg for stimulation. It does not crave novelty. It does not seek validation. It simply exists, fully present, fully grounded, fully sufficient. This is also why external guidance becomes unbearable at this stage. Guidance is loud by nature. It interrupts, it instructs, it instructs, it pushes. A free mind doesn't resist it. It just doesn't need it. Silence becomes the confirmation. When your inner world is quiet, decisions become clean. You stop oscillating between options. You stop second-guessing. You stop asking what comes next. Not because you don't yet care, but because you trust the stillness. Freedom does not announce itself. It does not prove itself. It does not explain itself. It simply remains. And if your life has recently become quieter, simpler, and less reactive, that is not stagnation. That is what a free mind feels like. At a certain level of awareness, signs stop appearing, not because the universe has gone silent, but because your mind has stopped asking questions it already knows the answer to. Most people chase signs because they don't trust their internal signal. They look for numbers, coincidences, words, confirmations, and external cues to reassure themselves that they are on the right path. This behavior feels spiritual, but at its core, it is hesitation disguised as faith. A fragmented mind needs signs because it is divided. One part wants to move, another part is afraid. Signs become a negotiation tool between action and doubt. But the free mind exits this pattern completely. Quantum physics shows that systems behave differently depending on the observer's state. When the observer is uncertain, reality appears fragmented and chaotic. When the observer is coherent, reality responds smoothly without dramatic feedback. This is why signs disappear when clarity stabilizes. You stop seeing repeating numbers. You stop looking for confirmation. You stop asking, is this meant for me? Not because meaning has vanished, but because meaning has become internal. At this stage, decisions don't feel emotional or mystical. They feel obvious, clean, neutral. There is no adrenaline rush. No spiritual drama, just a quiet knowing that does not require explanation. This is deeply uncomfortable for people who are addicted to intensity. They mistake the absence of signs for being lost. In reality, they have crossed into self-trust. A free mind understands something most people never realize. Signs are training wheels. They help you learn to listen. But once you can hear clearly, the training wheels come off. Chasing signs after coherence has stabilized actually weakens intuition. It reintroduces doubt. It creates a loop where you delay action while waiting for reassurance. That loop keeps many people spiritually stuck for years. The free mind does the opposite. It moves first, not impulsively, but decisively. And after it moves, reality rearranges itself. Opportunities appear. Resistance dissolves. Paths open. Not because signs were followed, but because alignment was already present. This is a crucial distinction. Signs are reactive. Alignment is proactive. Signs respond to confusion. Alignment responds to clarity. When your mind is free, you don't wait for the universe to speak. You speak through your choices, and reality echoes back. This is also why the free mind feels less emotional. Emotion spikes when there is uncertainty. When certainty becomes internal, emotional highs and lows flatten. Life feels steadier, calmer, and less dramatic. People around you may misunderstand this phase. They might say you've become distant, detached, or uninterested. In truth, you have stopped outsourcing meaning. You no longer need external reinforcement to justify your direction. The free mind does not interpret reality for reassurance. It interprets reality for response. Another important shift happens here. Patience changes form. You are no longer patient because you are waiting for something to happen. You are patient because you already know what is happening. This is why time feels different. Urgency fades. Anxiety dissolves. You no longer rush decisions, but you also don't delay them. Action happens at the exact moment coherence allows it. This is mastery, not control, not force, not manifestation rituals. Mastery is moving without needing signs to approve your movement. If you've noticed that you no longer look for confirmation the way you used to, if you act without asking for reassurance, if clarity comes without excitement, that is not a loss of spirituality. That is the maturation of it. You are no longer chasing signals. You have become the signal. And once that happens, guidance doesn't just end. Even signs bow out quietly, because they are no longer needed. The need to control life is not strength. It is compensation. Control emerges when the mind does not trust its relationship with reality. When outcomes feel unpredictable, the ego steps in and tries to manage every variable, every detail, every possible future. This behavior looks responsible on the surface, but underneath it is fear attempting to dress itself as discipline. Quantum physics exposes why control eventually collapses. At the most fundamental level of reality, certainty does not exist until observation occurs. Possibilities remain open, fluid, undefined. Trying to control outcomes before they unfold is not only ineffective, it directly interferes with natural alignment. This is why control exhausts the mind. A fragmented mind tries to force certainty before coherence exists. A free mind does the opposite. It stabilizes internally first, and then allows reality to organize itself around that stability. This is where trust shifts location. Most people are taught to trust systems, plans, predictions, or authority. But systems change. Plans fail. Authority collapses. External trust is fragile because it depends on conditions you cannot govern. Internal trust is different. Internal trust means your nervous system no longer panics when uncertainty appears. You stop trying to predict every outcome because you already know you will respond correctly when the moment arrives. This knowledge does not come from confidence. It comes from coherence. When coherence is stable, control becomes unnecessary. You no longer micromanage conversations. You no longer rehearse scenarios. You no longer cling to timelines. Not because you don't care, but because you are no longer afraid of misalignment. Quantum systems do not force outcomes. They allow collapse. Once the system is observed, reality selects the path that matches the state of the observer. This is not mysticism. It is a functional principle. A free mind understands this intuitively. You stop pushing life forward and start positioning yourself correctly. You focus on state instead of strategy. You refine clarity instead of chasing results. And as a result, outcomes feel smoother, less resistant, and strangely precise. This is often misinterpreted as passivity. It is not. There is a difference between surrender and avoidance. A free mind does not avoid action. It simply refuses to act from fear. When action comes from internal trust, it feels calm, timely, and proportionate. No excess. No desperation. This is also where effort changes texture. You still work. You still decide. You still move. But effort no longer feels heavy. It feels clean, directed, almost economical. You stop wasting energy trying to secure the future. You invest energy in maintaining coherence in the present. Control also disappears from your relationships. You stop trying to manage how people see you. You stop correcting misunderstandings. You stop defending your direction. Not because you are indifferent, but because your sense of stability is no longer dependent on external alignment. You allow others to interpret you however they need to. Your center remains untouched. This can feel unsettling at first. The ego equates control with safety. When control dissolves, the ego panics. It interprets surrender as danger. But what is actually happening is recalibration. You are learning that safety does not come from dominance over outcomes. It comes from trust in your internal signal. When trust is internal, even uncertainty becomes friendly. Unknown territory does not threaten you because you no longer rely on prediction to feel secure. You rely on responsiveness. This is a profound shift. Life stops feeling like something you must manage. It starts feeling like something you are cooperating with. This is why things begin to work out without effort. not because effort disappeared, but because resistance did. Control creates friction. Trust removes it. A free mind does not demand certainty. It is comfortable inside uncertainty, and that comfort is not weakness, it is mastery. When control fades, you don't lose direction. You gain alignment, and alignment always moves faster than force. This is the stage where the mind finally understands you were never meant to control reality. You were meant to align with it. And once that realization stabilizes, life stops pushing back because you are no longer pushing against it. Manipulation only works on minds that are still externally referenced. This is a hard truth most people never confront. Influence, persuasion, fear narratives, trends, authority pressure, and even shows of love or spirituality only succeed when the mind is still looking outward for orientation. The moment orientation becomes internal, manipulation loses its entry point. This is what beyond guidance really means. Guidance is not just advice. It is a psychological position. It places authority somewhere outside of you, and wherever authority exists, manipulation can follow. Not always maliciously, often subtly, even unconsciously, but inevitably. A free mind removes this structure completely. When your mind becomes self-referencing, there is nothing to hook into, no insecurity to exploit, no uncertainty to amplify, no need for approval to dangle. Manipulation depends on gaps. A coherent mind has none. This is why fear-based messaging suddenly stops working on you. News headlines feel theatrical. Urgent warnings feel exaggerated. Social pressure feels transparent. You don't argue with it. You don't fight it. You simply don't respond. This is not apathy. It is immunity. Quantum physics offers a useful parallel here. Systems that are internally stable do not absorb random interference. Noise passes through them without altering structure. Only unstable systems amplify disturbance. The same applies to the mind. When coherence is strong, emotional triggers fail to take hold. Someone can attempt to provoke you, pressure you, or rush you, but nothing inside you reacts. There is no resonance. Manipulation requires resonance. This is why many people unconsciously fear becoming free. They equate responsiveness with being human. They believe that if nothing triggers them, something must be wrong. In reality, they are confusing reactivity with aliveness. A free mind is not numb. It is selective. It chooses when to engage. It chooses when to move. It chooses when to remain still. And because of this selectivity, it becomes impossible to steer. Another major shift happens here. Authority collapses. Not authority in the sense of expertise or knowledge, but psychological authority. The kind that tells you what matters, what is urgent, what is acceptable, what is dangerous. You stop automatically deferring. You stop automatically complying. You stop automatically resisting. All three are forms of external control. Instead, you evaluate from coherence, not emotionally, not defensively, quietly. This is deeply unsettling for systems that rely on compliance. People may accuse you of being detached, uncooperative, or difficult to read. What they are actually sensing is that they can no longer influence you in predictable ways. This is the price of sovereignty. Beyond guidance, you also stop manipulating yourself. This is often overlooked. Most internal suffering comes from self-manipulation, forcing motivation, manufacturing excitement, shaming yourself into action, or using fear to stay productive. When guidance ends, these internal tactics collapse too. You stop pushing yourself through pressure. You stop threatening yourself with consequences. You stop bargaining with your own worth. Action still happens, but it comes from clarity, not coercion. This is why your energy feels cleaner at this stage. You are no longer split between a controlling voice and a resisting self. There is one direction, one signal, one movement. Manipulation cannot survive in a unified system, and this is the deepest reason guidance truly ends here. Not because you know everything, not because you reject learning, but because no one, including your own past conditioning, can override your internal authority anymore. This is not rebellion. This is not defiance. This is not superiority. It is independence at the level of consciousness. If you have noticed that pressure no longer moves you, if urgency feels artificial, if influence feels obvious rather than compelling, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming ungovernable, not in behavior, but in mind. And once a mind reaches this stage, it cannot be led, rushed, or controlled again, because it no longer lives in the space where manipulation operates. It lives beyond guidance. The search for purpose is one of the most misunderstood phases of human development. It is often framed as noble, spiritual, or enlightened. In reality, it is transitional. Purpose-seeking exists only when identity is still incomplete. A fragmented mind asks, "Why am I here?" A coherent mind asks nothing at all. Quantum systems do not search for purpose. They express function. An electron does not wonder what it should become. It behaves according to its state, and meaning emerges from that behavior naturally. The same principle applies to consciousness. When guidance ends, purpose dissolves with it. This does not mean life becomes empty. It means life becomes obvious. The need for purpose comes from separation. When you feel disconnected from your actions, you look for a reason to justify them. When coherence stabilizes, action and identity merge. You no longer need a story to explain why you move the way you do. You move because it is what coherence does. This is why purpose-driven language suddenly feels heavy. Find your why. Discover your mission. Align with your destiny. These phrases once felt inspiring. Now they feel unnecessary, even distracting. Not because they are wrong, but because they belong to an earlier stage. The free mind does not wake up asking what it should do with its life. It wakes up present, fully here, and from that presence, action flows without justification. This is deeply uncomfortable for cultures built on ambition and external validation. They rely on purpose narratives to motivate, to pressure, to extract performance. A person without a defined purpose cannot be easily directed. This is another reason guidance collapses here. Purpose is a handle. Meaning is a leash. When you stop searching for purpose, you remove the handle others can use to pull you. This does not make you passive. In fact, you may become more active than ever before, but your activity is no longer fueled by urgency, comparison, or the fear of wasting time. It is fueled by internal alignment. You don't front rush because you are behind. You don't let hustle because you are lacking. You don't chase because you are incomplete. You act because action feels clean. This is also why guilt disappears at this stage. Guilt is a byproduct of purpose narratives. It says, you should be doing more. You are not living up to your potential. You are wasting your life. A free mind does not measure itself against imagined futures. It measures itself against coherence in the present. If the present is aligned, there is nothing to fix. Time perception changes here. You stop feeling late. You stop feeling early. You stop feeling behind. Life no longer feels like a race toward fulfillment. Fulfillment becomes a state, not a destination. You stop organizing your life around outcomes and start organizing it around clarity. This is why anxiety fades. Anxiety is always future-based. Purpose-seeking is future-based. When both dissolve, the nervous system relaxes. The mind stops projecting itself into imagined timelines and returns to functional presence. You are no longer preparing to live. You are living. This does not mean you abandon goals. It means goals lose their emotional charge. They become directions, not identities. You can pursue something intensely without attaching your worth to the result. That is freedom. The most radical realization at this stage is this: you were never meant to find purpose. You were meant to express coherence. Purpose is something others assign to behavior after it happens. It is a label, not a source. The source has always been your internal state. Once this is understood, life stops feeling like a question. There is nothing to figure out, nothing to justify, nothing to explain. You are not here for a reason. You are here because coherence expresses itself, and that expression is enough. This is the moment where many people think they have lost direction. What they have actually lost is the illusion that direction comes from outside. Direction has moved inward, and once that shift occurs, guidance becomes obsolete, not because you reject it, but because you no longer need a reason to move. You move because coherence moves. That is the end of purpose-seeking, and the beginning of true freedom. Confirmation is one of the last dependencies to dissolve on the path to a free mind. It appears subtle, almost harmless, but it quietly governs countless decisions. Confirmation looks like responsibility. It feels like wisdom. In reality, it is hesitation wearing the mask of caution. A mind that seeks confirmation is a mind that does not fully trust its internal signal. Confirmation exists to reduce fear. It is a delay mechanism. You ask, check, double check, and wait. Not because clarity is absent, but because you are afraid of acting without approval. Approval from people, approval from systems, approval from imagined future outcomes. The free mind outgrows this entirely. Quantum systems do not pause to confirm reality before interacting with it. Interaction itself collapses possibility into outcome. The same principle applies to decision-making. When coherence is stable, action does not require reassurance. This is why confirmation disappears suddenly, not gradually. One day you notice that you no longer feel the urge to ask others what they think. You no longer seek agreement before moving. You no longer need someone to tell you, yes, this makes sense. The absence of confirmation does not create anxiety. It creates relief. This is not recklessness. This is internal authority activating. There is a critical difference between impulsivity and certainty. Impulsivity is emotional. It spikes, crashes, and doubts itself afterward. Certainty is quiet. It does not argue. It does not justify. It does not replay decisions in the mind. A free mind does not second guess, because there is no internal opposition left to negotiate with. Fragmentation is what creates internal debate. Coherence eliminates it. This is why decisions feel neutral at this stage. They do not come with excitement or fear. They come with stillness. You decide, and the mind moves on. No replay, no mental commentary, no need to be right. This is deeply unsettling to people who still rely on confirmation. They may interpret your decisiveness as arrogance or coldness. What they are actually sensing is that they can no longer influence your direction. Confirmation is a social tool. It exists to synchronize behavior within groups. When you stop seeking it, you exit invisible contracts. You stop participating in collective hesitation. This does not isolate you. It individuates you. Another subtle shift happens here. Self-trust becomes embodied. Most people say they trust themselves, but their behavior contradicts it. They delay, they check, they wait, they hesitate. True self-trust does not announce itself. It moves. You do not need to feel confident to act. You act because action is coherent. Confidence may follow, or it may not. It becomes irrelevant. This is also where regret disappears. Regret is rooted in imagined alternatives and the belief that a different choice would have been safer. A free mind does not entertain these fantasies. Once a decision is made, it becomes reality. Energy is not wasted revisiting paths that no longer exist. This creates enormous mental clarity. Time expands, focus sharpens, energy stabilizes. The mind is no longer split between what is and what could have been. Confirmation seeking also dissolves internally. You stop trying to motivate yourself with future rewards or scare yourself with future consequences. You stop asking, "Will this work?" and start asking, "Is this coherent now?" That question never requires confirmation. It answers itself immediately. This is the stage where many people finally experience mental quiet, not because they meditate more, not because they consume better content, but because the internal committee has disbanded. There is one voice now, not louder, not more aggressive, just clear. When confirmation disappears, freedom becomes practical. You move without friction. You act without delay. You rest without guilt. You speak without rehearsal. You live without constant self-surveillance. This is not detachment. This is integration. If you recognize this shift, the absence of needing approval, reassurance, or validation, you are not becoming careless. You are becoming aligned. An alignment does not ask permission. It moves. That is what a free mind does. And once this stage stabilizes, guidance does not return, because confirmation was the last doorway it used. Now that doorway is closed. Quietly, permanently. There is a point in development where nothing new needs to be added. No technique, no framework, no teacher, no upgrade. What changes is not what you know, but who is directing you. This is the stage most people never reach. True self-direction is not independence in behavior. It is independence in orientation. Your mind no longer points outward to decide how to move. It orients from within, automatically, without effort. This is why guidance doesn't just feel unnecessary here. It feels irrelevant. At earlier stages, direction comes from rules, goals, values, beliefs, or identities. You are guided by what you think you should be, what you were told to want, or what you fear becoming. Even awakening stages often rely on new identities to replace old ones. But self-direction dissolves identity itself as a guide. You are no longer driven by who you think you are. You are driven by coherence in the present moment. Quantum systems behave this way. They do not store instructions about how to respond to every possible situation. They respond dynamically, in real time, based on current conditions. No memory-based control, no future-based anxiety, only precise responsiveness. A self-directed mind operates the same way. This is why life begins to feel fluid, not chaotic. Fluid. You adapt without resistance. You respond without rehearsal. You act without tension. There is no internal delay between perception and movement. This is mastery, not dominance over others, not control over outcomes, control over your state, and state directs everything. At this level, morality, ambition, spirituality, and productivity all undergo a quiet transformation. You don't abandon them. You stop clinging to them. They become expressions, not rules, tools, not identities. You don't just act good to be good. You don't pursue growth to become more. You don't seek enlightenment to escape pain. You act because the action fits the moment. This eliminates internal conflict completely. Most inner conflict comes from competing directives, desire versus duty, logic versus emotion, fear versus ambition. Self-direction collapses these binaries. There is only coherence or incoherence, alignment or misalignment, and the body knows the difference instantly. This is why decisions feel clean. No justification, no internal debate, no regret afterward. The decision emerges, and the mind follows it effortlessly. This is also the stage where responsibility becomes natural. You no longer feel burdened by choice because there is no one to blame. Not fate, not people, not circumstances. But this responsibility does not feel heavy. It feels stabilizing. You trust yourself because there is no alternative. Not in a dramatic way, in a functional way. This is deeply threatening to systems built on dependency. A self-directed individual cannot be motivated through fear, reward, shame, or promise. None of these bypass internal orientation. They simply fail to land. This does not make you rebellious. It makes you unreachable. Unreachable by manipulation. Unreachable by pressure. Unreachable by narratives designed to steer behavior. You still listen. You still learn. You still consider information. But nothing overrides coherence. This is why the final stage often feels lonely at first. Not because you are isolated, but because most conversations operate at the level of guidance, validation, or confirmation. You no longer participate in those loops. You are not above others. You are simply elsewhere. And eventually even that sense dissolves. There is no comparison left, no hierarchy, no timeline. Just presence moving through life with precision. True self-direction does not announce itself. It does not seek recognition. It does not prove completion. It is invisible, quiet, and deeply effective. If guidance ended for you, if confirmation disappeared, if purpose dissolved, if control relaxed, you did not lose structure. You became structure. This is not the beginning of something new. It is the end of dependence. And the moment a mind reaches this stage, it cannot return. Not because it refuses to, but because there is nowhere to return to. You are no longer being led. You are no longer seeking direction. You are not becoming free. You are functioning from freedom. And that is the final stage. If guidance no longer works for you, if confirmation feels unnecessary, if silence feels clearer than noise, you didn't miss something. You completed something. Most people spend their lives searching for direction. Some awaken. Very few arrive at the point where direction dissolves. That is where you are now. This is not about being better than anyone. It's about being unreachable by fear, pressure, and manipulation. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to convince anyone. A free mind doesn't seek recognition. It simply moves, and reality adjusts. If this video didn't excite you, confuse you, or shock you, if it felt calm, obvious, and strangely familiar, that sets the confirmation. Guidance didn't leave you. You outgrew it. And once a mind reaches this point, it never goes back.